Just 9 days ago, after the flooding in and around Kerrville, Texas, killed at least 129 people, the devastated area was hit again yesterday with heavy rains, hampering rescue efforts, recovery efforts. As with many disasters that happen here domestically or internationally, Samaritan's Purse has been working to assist victims and show the love of Christ to those who are hurting deeply after this tragedy. Here now to share more on what they've been doing in Texas is Edward Graham, the Chief Operating Officer of Samaritan's Purse. Edward, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for taking time to join us.
Hey, Tony. Thanks for always having us on. Appreciate highlighting what's happening in Texas.
Well, this one's getting a little more attention, and the attention is staying focused on it because of the tragic loss of life of these young girls. But you were there on the ground last week, and Samaritan's Purse has been there almost since the water first started to recede. Give us a sense of what you saw there.
Yeah, you know, the destruction is unbelievable. As you said, there's so much hurt and pain there. There's a lot of brokenness. So right now, you know, if you're people that are watching, you have to pray for Texas. Remember to pray. Have your families praying. Nothing we say or even our volunteers that are out working and mucking out homes can do is really going to solve the problem of their hurt and brokenness. But prayer will. And so that's what I ask your viewers to do. But what I saw is a very narrow channel path. Think of like a tornado path that just came through, and it's mostly just to the river valley is where the destruction is, but it's unbelievable. It is, you know, they've never seen destruction like this. They're used to flash floods out there, but not to this level, not to this height. There's people there that didn't they're in areas where you would never think to have flood insurance because you're that high and that far away from the river, but it came that far. You're talking to homeowners. And this one lady was telling me, you know, she heard a gurgling noise about 4 in the morning, and she looked and she saw water under her door. Mm-hmm. And she said within seconds her bed was in the air and her head was hitting the ceiling. They didn't have time. But there was no one there angry and talking about, you hear the politics of the early warning, not having early warning. That's not what they're talking about. They weren't angry about that. They're just hurting for their neighbors, and I saw Texans helping Texans. They're getting after it. There's heavy equipment, skid steers, excavators everywhere, and volunteers out serving. Texas is a wonderful place, and they're loving on one another.
Now, you mentioned how rapidly this water rose in a very narrow place coming down through the Guadalupe River. Is that similar to what you saw with the flooding in North Carolina after the hurricane?
Yeah, so, you know, Helene happened, it was a little later in the morning, and we watched the water rise up in daylight. So a lot of people were able to see the water get to higher places. The thing with Helene, it was widespread. It took over all of western North Carolina, and it was every creek, river, and valley flooded. From what I saw there, yes, there was other areas that had flood damage because if you're not familiar with the hill country of Texas, it's very rocky. That water has nowhere to go, and it goes down these old washes into the Guadalupe River. But in this case, it was mostly funneled into the Guadalupe River, and that's where all the damage was predominantly that we saw. I saw a couple other areas, but nothing like Helene. And just, I would say the rapid rise of it was faster in that part even than it was in Carolina.
You know, having gone through a flood like that, and ours was slow in rising, so you had time to respond and make a decision and, you know, get out by boat. But in the middle of the night, when you're disoriented anyway, because you're asleep, and all of a sudden you see water coming up like that so rapidly, there's very little warning that could have been done to alert these folks to this. So it is.
Yeah, there was very little warning. And I need to be careful as those people that live in parts of North Carolina where it did rise. I mean, there's places that entire communities were destroyed. Asheville, on the backside of Mount Mitchell, it was rapid. So, every storm's different, but to the person that lives it or the people that lost, it's horrific.
Yeah.
And so, I'm very careful when I talk about and compare storms. Everyone's different, and everyone has their challenges.
So let's talk about responding. As you mentioned, prayer, number one. In fact, so many families all across the nation touched because of the camps that they were there. There were kids from all over that were at these camps. So we're praying. In fact, the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, had challenged our viewers and listeners to pray for 30 days. Keep praying because the pain is going to be ongoing of the loss. Let's talk about work that Samaritan's Purse is doing on the ground and how folks can be a part of that.
Yeah. You know, people always want, what can I do? How can I get involved? And we've already talked about prayer. That's what I always ask for first. But if you would like to volunteer, we definitely need like day laborers, people that can come locally, because our actual volunteers to sign up and overnight are booked for a couple weeks, and that's good. And I appreciate that, but we're not going anywhere. Right now we're doing muck outs and mud outs. We're cutting back debris. We're mudding out the homes. We're taking the drywall, we're cutting it back, and we spraying the solution to prevent the mold from going in there. And so there's several homes that we got to do. There's some trailer parks that washed away, but we're going to help with rebuilding as well. So for those people, we're looking at people that even lost their cars. We're looking at people that lost their mobile homes, their stick-built homes. We will work there. We already have assessors for that part of the rebuild on the ground. Matter of fact, the community that you're just seeing that I was in, that we're mudding out right now, we're actually going to set up a tent in that community in a neighbor's yard, and we're going to start going through and assessing where people are as far as their insurance and non-insured and underinsured, and we're going to help get people back in their homes quickly. There's some camps that we'll help out with as well. This will take a while, and this is not something that's going to be quick. No rebuild is. But at the end of the day, I do ask your volunteers to stay engaged. If your listeners want to get involved, I'm going to need volunteers for a while. So when the news cycle moves on to something else, just remember Texas will still be hurting, and Samaritan's Purse will need your prayers, but the volunteers.
SamaritansPurse.org, and I know for a fact that Samaritan's Purse will stay there until the work is done, long after everyone else has left. Edward, always great to see you. Thanks for joining me, my friend.